we left off exporting our assets from the design. In this stage, I would basically start getting into either adding content to our site or just start styling. I think what I'll do is the latter and do the content first, at least for a few sections to get things rolling. We could kind of streamline styles and the content at the same time, just to start seeing the bigger picture. So to do that, I'm going to reference our design here quite a bit to go back and just make these additions. One thing I will do is add a few plugins that I like to make use of. You might as well. I'll add that and then explain what we do with each. To get started stylistically, I like to start with a simple normalize reset, which is CSS to reset all the major browsers default styles. We could install it using npm like we did with Go, but I'm just going to do this direct and copy and paste. So if you Google normalize.css, you'll find this repo. And to add it to our project, I'm going to just go into assets, styles, or SAS, partials, and I'm going to create a new one and just call it reset. And it's SCSS, so forget that. And for a partial, you want to prefix it with an underscore. Doing that means it won't actually compile to its own style sheet file, which is what we want. We want one global style sheet file. At least I do in this project. If you wanted something different, you can keep that prefix out and it would render, and you can link to that specific style sheet if you need it on a specific page, or say the login page, etc. if you need a custom login page. So adding that, if all went well, I think we need to import it in our style, our global style file. So we'll do import partials, since it's the root folder of the partials, and then reset. And that should sync up. And if you notice in the background, the browser updated at least the typography, which is something that's kind of part of normalize. I kept this here with the assumption that we'd use this, so we're going to do that. On top of that, there's a few basic files I tend to include. Those are Mixins, which are like, I don't know, reusable elements or components in SAS, which are really useful. And then I keep a global variable style file, so I just call that variables.scss. I do have some snippets that I tend to use on hand. You saw that in my last video with the gulp stuff. I do the same with SAS. There are some mixins. I use certain breakpoint mixins for responsiveness. This one I kind of stole, I believe, from CSS Tricks, Chris Coyer's implementation on this, but I expanded on it in terms of sizing. All the sizes are configurable, so when you enter, say you're on an element like my element, we'll get into more of this, but I'll just show you by example. If I could type, you want to do an @media query. I can't type today, but you would do something like that. But I have in Sublime, you can create snippets. So I created one for medium. It's just called, if I type medium and hit tab, it'll include this. The include is part of SAS. That looks for our mixins, which are here. From there, it looks for this specific mixin. So I called it breakpoint, and then it uses this point. It passes this through. You tell it what size. So here I've labeled it large, medium, small, extra small, mega. And when I do pass that through, that comes through. So here I just typically do medium. That's for more or less like your mobile phone or smaller tablet screens. That's kind of my kind of go-to breakpoint, but I do have a large snippet as well. I won't go into how to create a snippet on this video, but it's something you should definitely make use of if you find yourself repeating a lot of code. Sublime's really great at it, and you can actually do very cool like tab preferences. So if you hit tab once, it'll put your cursor somewhere, and then again it'll throw it somewhere else. I'll show you that when we get into some of the PHP. I have another thing I used for that. Some of these aren't so necessary. Transition I use on some things. I like to keep this pretty concise. I don't really go crazy with mix-ins and stuff like that if I don't have to. Font size, in terms of scalability, it's good to have some sort of unit value that's scalable. In that case, I like to use rems as opposed to pixels. Since we start everything kind of at a pixel base, this function here, which you can create in SAS, references, it gets referenced here in the font size mix-in. So if I do at include font size, and then I could just throw in like a pixel value, since that's what I'm always familiar with. It'll render that based on a rem. That's kind of a neat feature. So I haven't used this one a lot, so I think I don't know if I need that or if I just throw in the number, but we'll find out. It'll error if I don't do it right. I used to have a set of like just prefixed offsets. Yeah, here we go. So this is just basically my own little library of, I'm going to put this in variables, pixel based, but ems offsets. I like to use ems where I can, because pixels are so strict and stagnant that if a design scales like it needs to on most devices, ems tend to do a better job at that. For what it's worth, you can use rems here, you can use pixels, it doesn't matter, but I like to use this, and I just call offset as a variable. So if we had, again, an element and I needed some padding, and I could just throw like offset 10, it throws in about 0.625 ems or 10 pixels on that element. And I've pre-configured what these calculations are. There's a tool out on the web that does pixel to ems. Just Google it, it's there. So that's kind of a starting point for mix-ins, variables. Of course, I go deeper as I go with the project. I have branding colors, font families and stuff like that. So for this project, I need to get our fonts in order. To do that, I think I have to reference what we have here. We have Alio. Yeah. So it's spelled Alio. I'm going to just make a note for now. And then I think this is ASAP. Yeah. So for a typical design, my limit on fonts is 2. I don't go over that. If I can get away with 1, I even go that route and use a pre-existing font that's on everyone's computer if you can. There's a huge set of reasons why I do that, but mostly it's for speed. Here I'm gonna go download this font and use it in our project. It's a Font Squirrel font. Yeah, let's get the kit. I don't know that I need all of these, but I'm going to have them just in case. We can go back and get rid of them. So with at font face, you have a typical declaration to get the specific font in place. So I'm going to create a new partial. I'm going to call it Typography. Sorry if that's cutting off. So in this file, I'm going to declare these. I'm going to open up each one. So this one's just an italic one. I need to get all of them. Let me do this real quick. I think I got that one. No, I need this one too. And like I said, I don't think I'll use all of these, but I don't want to have to go back and do this again. So I'm going to get them for now and then get rid of them later. Since we're working locally, it's not a big deal. All right. Cool little plugin I like to use for Sublime is Prettify, and it just kind of formats your code. Kind of messes up some code, so be careful with it, but for the most part it does pretty well. We have to remember to import all of these. So let me do that. Partials, let's do mixins. Let's do variables first. Add import. Partials, variables. Again, I'm just referring to my partial list here to get these files into one. Variables and mixins won't even really render. They're just there so we can use them inside of our other partials. That's a cool thing about SAS, is it's kind of suggestive in that realm. Move this. The typography. I can't spell. Cool. So if all goes well, oh, we got a little error in gulp here, unknown word. Let's see if it runs. Oh, we still got it. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of these comments. It looks like post CSS or whatever is having an issue. Oh, I know why. It's because I have this in here. Get rid of those. All right. Sadly, when an error happens like that, it'll kill your entire server. It's still doing it. There's a way or a plugin I think I can use to get rid of it. I just haven't really messed with that yet, but it definitely would help my workflow. Because sometimes you label things wrong or an error happens and then your whole environment just goes to shit and it sucks. Let's try this again. There we go. So it should be running. Yep. All right. So we downloaded these files, and we referenced them, but they're actually not pointing to anything yet. We need to add a folder to our assets folder called fonts. Inside that, we can add those fonts. Let me go to my downloads. Open up Finder, web fonts. I just need these. I got my alias to the actual theme here. I'm gonna pull that folder up and add these in. You just copy and paste on the Mac, Command C and Command V. All right, so we have our fonts in. We need to make sure they're linked correctly from this file. So I need to do, where are we at here? We need to do assets. You know what? Sublime Text is also cool for this. I'll just show you with one for now and then we'll do the rest. Command clicking puts a cursor in front of all of these so you can type everything the way you want. Saves a lot of time. Cool. All right, I'm hoping this works. What I'm gonna do though to get things going in our variables, I'm gonna do like offsets. I'm gonna do fonts, or let's just, I don't like to call it fonts. In school, they instilled in our brains to not call it fonts, but typography, or anyway, let's bring those namings back in. I'm gonna make these variables so I can refer to them easier. You'll see in a minute what I do. So essentially we're still laying the groundwork to getting this theme up and running. As you can see, it's kind of a long but tedious task, but if you set it up right, it makes your workflow going forward that much smoother. I don't know, I like to do all this beforehand, just to make my life easier. If I have to stop the project and start it again later, I just have a much better stress level. All right, so I'm gonna do this. This is literally just to have the font name in a variable. I could probably call it something easier. Don't forget your semicolons. That will break if you do. All right, so that's our first font. That one's an @font face. The other one I believe is a Google font. It's called ASAP. I should probably put font. That's font scroll too, but it's on Google. Google's a little easier. I'm gonna select it. We're gonna use customize. Do we use bold? Basic there, basic. There's bold. So yeah. All right. Let's get regular, italic, bold, and italic. Yeah, that kills the load time, but actually I don't think I need italic on bold. It doesn't look like it matters. All right. Now, how do I use this? One thing about Google. Okay, so we have this link, and you could go in your header and just assume that that lives all good and well here, and it will work. But WordPress, in terms of the right way to do it, at least in the community, you actually go into your functions file, and here you enqueue a script. I believe this one's called enqueue style, so we'll actually do a style again, but a script would be something like a JavaScript. But you could do that all here. It's called by this function in this action, or you can create a new action based on what you want to do. This one here in particular grabs this style sheet, since a theme has to have a style.css file to work. It already knows that that's the direct path, so they created a get style sheet URI function or method out of that. In our case, this one's going to be ASAP. We're going to do H2O ASAP font. You can call this what you want. And then in this parameter, you pass in the actual link, not all the HTML, but just the actual link, semicolon at the end. I think there's more parameters you can use, especially on actual scripts. Like if you want to load it in the header or the footer, if it depends on like another library like jQuery of some sort, and one or two other things. I don't know 100% what those are all the time, but a lot of times I'll find old projects and copy code from those. But anyway, this will enqueue this style. So essentially we have this font family available to us once we link it this way. So I'm going to go into typography, and I'm going to add, this is Alio, and this one's ASAP. Oops. All we need to add for this one is this. We'll do regular. We'll just do ASAP. So since these are called, we're using alio for headings, I'm going to actually do a heading variable and then call in alio regular. So once you define this variable, you can use it again or pass it to a new one. And then in this case, I'm going to move this. We'll do body, which is like the body content. I'm going to pass in ASAP. And we could create mixins and the whole thing around this, but I'm going to leave it as is for now. To really test if this works, let's add a base style sheet as another partial. This one I'm going to just define some basic styles on our like body, just to make sure everything's working good. Let's just make sure it works first. Just do some random background color. Cool. And you saw that updated automatically. That's the power of Gulp running in the background. I don't have to refresh or anything. That's actually browser sync inside of Gulp, but anyway, it does the same thing. So what we want to do, the font family of the body is going to be our body variable we just created here, which points to ASAP. So as you can see, it just worked. This is the ASAP font in our design. You can pull up the computed. Here it is. Cool. Make that bigger. Okay. Our headings, for brevity, I'm going to just do H1, H2, H3, 4, 5, 6. Font family, alio, or heading, since I declared that. So there, that worked. Cool. For our links, I'm going to do text decoration none for now, because they're ugly. I don't know that we'll use lists a whole lot, but I'll keep them as is for now. Line height, something I like to have. Let me do a baseline height. I don't know, I'll reorder these when I get them more profound. We'll do baseline height and like 1.5 rem maybe. It's probably too much, but we'll see. Baseline height. Cool. We'll see if that looks good when we get into more copy. All right. So at this point, I'm gonna grab another resource I like to use. It's called Flexbox Grid, and this is basically a set of classes you can use that utilize Flexbox as opposed to floats. If you're familiar with pushing content around on a web page, these do a very similar job to something in like Bootstrap, if you're familiar with that framework. Mainly in that regard, just the class names, they're very similar. This one adds a few more things that you can have, like auto width. If you don't even have a class for the containing element, it'll kind of just know what to do thanks to Flexbox. Same thing with alignment. You can actually throw a class in the row itself, and it will tell, tell the content inside what part of the div to live or to start or to end or to center on. So check it out, flexboxgrid.com. To grab it, we'll just get the file itself. It's already in 6.3.1, the version, so that's pretty miraculous. I would assume the dist file is the final CSS, so I'm going to grab that. Sometimes I like to modify the grid though, so I'm gonna grab the unminified version. There are some things I don't really like, but most of it is good to go. I just named this file grid.css SCSS in my partials directory, paste that content in, and I believe we're good to go. What I like to remove are these negative margins. I don't like them. Just remember to do that on double check here. Yeah, I think we're all set. Yep. Okay, so let me scan back up. Yeah, we'll see as we go, but I need to make sure I import this. Import partials grid. And do I need all those grid classes? No, but I keep them handy basically when I'm working. And then if I want to go back and remove some CSS I know I didn't use, that's something you should maybe think about doing for the sake of loading less CSS in the end that doesn't even really get used. So from there, I think what we'll do is get our grid set up and then in the video, and then I'll start a new one for fresh, adding content to our theme here. So I already know in our design, the content itself is fixed in a container. So see how it's pushed from the edge, but the backgrounds behind it are full width for the most part. So to do that, that means we need to add like a grid element for each section. So for our header in particular, we'll need like a grid that will encompass all this stuff. This section will need its own little grid just to keep things going, but still allow us to have that full background. That means more divs and more code, but realistically, that's kind of the only way to do it. So I'm going to keep the header intact. I'm going to add, don't really need to use our Flexbox Grid, but I'm going to create a class. I'm going to get rid of this, or I'm going to actually make container. Here's the addition I add of max width. So one I like to use is 1170. It seems to work pretty well. I think Bootstrap uses that width on its desktop resolutions. So it's kind of tried and tested. Make sure you do margin 0 auto. That will center that div. So anything wrapped in a container now will have this max width. So if we did container here and close it down here, I'm going to indent this. You should see this content jump. There we go. So now this is inside a container element right here, and you can see it's got the max width and then the margin on the sides. So that's pretty handy. So when we get down to the smaller screens, based on our grid, I think it's already set to handle that, to get rid of the margin. We can add padding back or something like that so it's not touching the edge. I'll do that when we get to it. This design certainly won't be mobile first, by the way. Everyone always says you should do it that way, but I think I can't conceptualize a designing it for a phone first and then back to the desktop. So I'm probably the one and only person that goes against that conformity, but so sue me. That sets our grid up. We can go one step further and for our front page do something similar for this section. Since I'm going to do this kind of section by section, I might create like a actual section class section, and then if I could spell, inside that we'll have our container. And then inside that will be like our Flexbox stuff or just content in general. So if you do Lorem tab. It's just going to be there. Why didn't it work though? Oh, class name's wrong. Boom. So that gives you an idea. We'll get into adding more content here in a second, but I think we're squared away to start adding real content to the page. So let's do that in the next video.